Hi, everyone. I'm Jean. I'm the VP of Engineering at Range, which is a tool for running your remote or hybrid team. And I'm here with Ellen today. Hi, Ellen.
Hi, I'm Ellen, Director of Engineering at Calm. Happy to be here.
So, Ellen works at Calm. She leads their B2B product engineering and backend platform and prides herself on building happy and productive teams where people have fun as well. So let's talk about burnout. And if you're watching, feel free to add your questions in the live chat at any time, and we'll get to them at the end. So, Ellen, to start off, just like talking about this year of burnout, can you just kind of paint us a picture of how this year has been for you and your team with regards to burnout?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I think back to the last 12 months, it's been an interesting year. There is somewhat around the first half where people were, very much living in fear before they got, access to a vaccine, and just afraid of dying, afraid for their family. And so there was just a lot of stress and anxiety in that part and managing that. And as people get vaccinated, then it's a different kind of burnout where, a lot of people had perhaps hoped that once they get that vaccine, life would go back to what it was before. And they quickly realize, oh no, that's not the case. And so then it becomes a whole realization of this is what life is going to be for, for some quite some time now. And that is another kind of burnout. And so, yeah, I think looking at the different times, it was, I think, around June, July, where we saw some amount of surprise where people really starting to be more vocal about, I feel burnout. Like, and to me, that was actually a sign where people are coming out of the fear and stress and starting to think about how do I create a sustainable life way into the future and managing the life, like, during and post COVID.
Mm-hmm. What are what did you see kind of earlier on? Because I imagine that when by the time people can recognize burnout in themselves, they're probably already like pretty far into it. So I'm curious if there's anything you noticed kind of earlier on from your team of like kind of early signs.
Yeah, definitely. I think in my teams and even with like leaders that I talk to, outside of a calm organization, what often I hear and see is that Sunday anticipating, oh, it's another week, instead of like going in there and saying, yeah, it's pretty cool. It's going to be another week. It's like, it's that again. I'm dreading
Yeah.
it. So there is that shift in the tone, right? And I think within my own organization, the telltale signs when I see that perhaps one of my leaders are burned out is when they are escalating things that seemingly not is that big of a deal. Like you're seeing conflict that is kind of coming out of, in a
Mm-hmm.
way, nowhere. And when you talk to them, they can't quite logically, reasonably tell you why this is such a big deal. And that's when that's like a very obvious sign that, hey, maybe let's kind of take a step back and figure out what about this is so triggering for you, and perhaps it is definitely time for a vacation. So yeah, those are some key
Mm-hmm.
signs.
It sounds like the things that usually people on your team or like people have the capacity to deal with. When they're in the early stages of burnout, they may be lacking that, or especially if everyone's kind of dealing with the same same global event or dealing with some level of burnout, then your overall capacity to deal with like some conflict just is lower all around. um,
Yeah.
that I feel like as a manager, it's one of those things where like if you have 10 people, every so often one person's going to be having a bad week. But with the pandemic, I feel like everyone's having a bad week every week, and you're also having a bad week every week, and so it's just like unprecedented for managers to deal with this type of situation.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is so spot on. I think in the beginning, I thought, oh, what can I do better? What can us as an organization, as leaders, do better? And then I started talking with, I made an effort to keep in touch with like leaders outside of the organization. that's when I realized this is a year where nobody really knows what they're doing. Like everybody's struggling. And so what was actually really powerful was when talking with leaders all through different ranks, different size companies, everybody is saying the same thing. I have a hard time getting my teams engaged. People are faced with very difficult, challenging personal and family situations. I don't know how to help them. And so there is this sense of like helplessness, like, just drops of this across everywhere that I've, talked to and heard of. And that in a way, like gives me a signal that during really challenging times, there's perhaps a reset in expectations. This is during a global pandemic. There's very challenging like situations at home for some people, their parents, or perhaps like, sickness in the family. And so it's really not business as usual. So first step is to reset your expectation that, what you used to feel like it's a normal, like it's no longer true. So, kind of recalibrate what is a reasonably good situation, given the circumstance.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I've seen is like leaders are like, oh, you should take recharge days, but then leaders and execs kind of like still keep working at the same pace and maybe don't reset expectations for themselves. I'm curious, for you personally, what is your own experience and have like what are the early warning signs that you notice in yourself when you start to feel burnt out?
Yeah, I think you touched on a really good point. A lot of this is so much of it is like we need to lead by example. The high up you are, the more you need to lead by example.
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps for me and senior leaders, like what I really appreciate is like when they take vacation, they're actually really vocal about it. Personally, I'm on vacation right now. I'm out here in Utah with nature. And I tell my team, like a month before my vacation, I've been telling them, I'm going on a winter escape. I'm going to be taking vacation and like telling them. And even personally, when I start to feel, that loss of resiliency, that,
Mm-hmm.
maybe I'm slightly more agitated when there's, challenges or conflict. I do tell my team, like I do to say, I'm noticing that I might be, seeing some early signs of burnout. And what I notice is when I have these conversations with folks on the team, is they're more open and willing to share when they are also having similar but perhaps different signs of burnout or stress. Um, it's not, it's a common topic, right? Like we not talk about every one-on-one, but when I do feel like I'm not my best self, I tell them. And so my hope is that gives them the permission to tell me as well when they're not feeling 100%. And so much of our day-to-day work is you know is with people at work, and so we really want to be presenting our best selves. And it's only when you are able to recharge, able to not be under constant stress, that you're able to be your best self at work. So
Yeah. I love that you share that with people because I feel like, especially in one on ones, there's this sort of like unspoken boundary of like, what can we talk about in this relationship? And if you only talk about like work, then that's going to be the boundary, right? But if you kind of are the one as the manager to nudge that scope of like, yeah, I'm honestly not feeling great this week. Like I've been feeling like I'm having a little bit of trouble feeling motivated. Then that suddenly expands the boundary of what you can talk about in that relationship and lets you then get a more accurate assessment of like how they're doing, right? Because they may not feel safe saying, I'm actually really struggling unless you share something about how maybe you're struggling. And it's a good time to do it because like honestly, everyone's had a lot of struggles this past year. So it would be like it'd be hard to be like, oh, I don't have anything to share that I'm struggling with. Um, I'm
yeah.
curious, other than kind of creating that space to talk about how people are doing in a more honest and open way, what else have you found effective in alleviating burnout in your team?
Yeah, something I started doing recently, I call it the confession time. And this is something I do with my ops, and it's something that I encourage, like, that I do with my reports as well. So this is how it goes. Uh, uh, you know, Given a specific week, maybe I do it like every, once or twice a quarter. I basically have a document where I write down what is the active list of things that I'm working on and what is an inactive list of things that I'm working on. Um, Number one thing is, even when you're writing the list, it's very illuminating because you realize, oh, this is why I'm so tired. There is like 40 things on this list that I'm working on. Of course I'm tired. So there's like, first off, it's just like kudos to self, like, oh, I'm doing so much. Good job. um, and then what I found is like, I decided to share this list with my manager, right? And what was actually really interesting is it was such a big relief because I'm like saying, at any one point, we're trying to catch all the balls. Like there's so many things happening at once and we're trying to catch everything. But the subtle thing is not every ball is equal, right? Some things can be dropped. It's not ideal, but it can be dropped. And it's like knowing which ones is so important. And in the new world where everything is remote, your manager don't actually have visibility of all the things that you're actively working on. Unlike, maybe if you're in office, you're like seeing them actively engage in something and you can course correct. So when I share this list, one, like it allows your manager to say, hey, these are things that I can actually uniquely help you with very easily. And for the inactive list, where I'm like, I'm not working on these, it's like shared responsibility now, because like you've confessed that this is something you're knowingly not doing, and permission to no longer worry about this list of things. And as I started doing this, I found it to be super helpful, and I started doing it with my report as well. And as I started doing it, sometimes it's very illuminating that they would be going down a list and they would be telling me, oh, I'm so sorry, I am not doing enough, I'm dropping all of these things. And in my mind, I was actually looking at the list. I'm like, are you kidding me? You're doing amazing. Look at all of the things that you are doing. And so allowing me to reset with the managers on my team as well, like, giving them validation of the things that they are doing and permission to not do some of the things that they're currently dropping, and it's totally fine. And so, yeah, I think that definitely helps with sustainability of our work, because at any one time we have more work than we have capacity for. So it's really important to know which ones is really truly worth stressing about and what we can definitely drop.
Yeah, I love that exercise because I feel like, just in an engineering career progression, there's a point at which you can no longer do all the things that are like kind of thrown in your direction, right? If you're like a junior engineer, you take on the tasks, you like code them up, you hand them back. It's like you can almost always stay on top of the things that are handed to you. And like, I think there's that in between period where people think they can, but they actually can't. That's like really, really challenging, because then you're just putting in longer hours. You're just like doing more and trying to keep up with it all. And so having an explicit practice to just like acknowledge, like, I can't do all the things, but here are explicitly the things I'm not doing, so that you and I both know that like I'm not thinking about that at all. It just feels like so, so important. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
I guess in general, as I mentioned before, everyone's kind of has been struggling. Managers are also struggling. And like, any advice for like, just, I don't know, for managers take care of themselves, or how to support their team when maybe they themselves are having some challenges? Anything that you found useful, either for the managers that you manage or for yourself?
Yeah, I definitely agree that especially frontline managers, like the first level managers, is likely the most stressed out right now. They are, accountable for a project that they are trying to deliver a certain outcome, and at the same time, they are trying to make sure that people on the team are okay. And with all the engineering managers I've talked to in the last year, they all say similar things like, I can't get my teams to be engaged. They have a really tough situation at home. And how do I give feedback when they're already down? Like, and part of it is, first off, is realization that everyone that in that position are having similar struggles, so they're not alone. I think just that piece was very helpful when I share them with the engineering managers. And another piece that I found to be valuable is that there was a week where I felt really tired, just like, okay, I need a vacation. So I took a week off. Wasn't going on vacation or anything, just taking some time and space to think, really. And so I was taking a step back and thinking about what about my situation, the system that I'm inside is working for me versus not. And what I realized, and then I'm sure many engineering managers find, is since going remote, their meeting load might have increased by a lot, right? Like what we used to do in office now might be replaced by a meeting. And over the course of like the year and a half, those meetings might have accumulated. And so what I actually realized is those meetings wasn't always, equally productive, and it was stealing time from me in order to have space to think. And over time, I don't have that focused time, and that leads to burnout because you don't get in flow when you're always interrupted. So as a result of that, I took a step back and started triaging my meeting. We're good at prioritization. So I just literally write down, like, let's say if I have 30 meetings, like how are they like prioritized? And I just try to cut my meeting load. I think before I did that exercise, I noticed my meeting load was getting to like 30 hours a week, which is really, really high for me. And after that, I try to cut them in half. So like at the point where I'm hitting the threshold of 15 hours of meeting a day, I really tried to ask the question, is that 16th or 17th hour like a week? It might be hyper, and depends on your circumstance. But I truly try to cut it in half. And anytime like I'm creeping over the threshold, I want to be conscious about like doing that instead of just letting going through the motions. So those are I think the key thing takeaway for me was just that 1 week of thinking allow me to kind of take a step back and figuring out what in my system is working for me versus not. And meeting load was one of the things that wasn't, and making a change was it's going to allow me to be having a more sustainable work life.
Yeah, that's amazing that you were able to kind of step back and then effectively cut your weekly meeting load from 30 to like 15 to 16 hours. I will say you should check out Range, which helps you put your updates into like asynchronous check-ins, but we also have like a team dashboard where you can monitor or just like have a sense of people's meeting load, so you can see if as a team it's kind of creeping up into like people are not having enough focus time. That's actually a good segue into the question we have in Q&A, which is any benefits for audio only meetings over video?
Yeah. I would say at my work that most of my meetings, especially one-on-one meetings, we do have video on. And the beginning of the pandemic, like there's this whole like, oh, Zoom is new and let's go on video. But at some point it does have this fatigue. So like now what I do is like sometimes occasionally if I don't feel my best, I'll turn off video, and I encourage people to do the same thing. Sometimes if like you're really familiar with that person and you don't really need all that extra, like every now and then we would do a walking meeting where we would just like have like audio only. So yeah, I think there is benefits, but it really is case by case basis. Like for some people, I really do want to have that extra level of like information how they are feeling. So yeah, it just kind of depends on the relationship.
Yeah, I've converted most of my one-on-ones actually to phone calls, which is really nice because then I actually get out of the house and I'm able to walk around. I think there's audio only, and then there's like audio only where you can walk around, right? Like audio only
Yeah.
Zoom calls, you still kind of need to be be near your computer, and there's also that like mental like cognitive question of like, oh, do I turn on the video or turn it off, and what does that mean to the other person? Whereas like if you agree on a phone call, it's like audio only, do whatever you want. So
Yeah.
I definitely appreciate that mix for sure. Well, thank you, Ellen, so much for talking with me today. If you're watching, you can connect with Ellen and I on Twitter. Ellen's handle is EWONF, EWONF, and then mine is JYHSU, JYHSU. So thanks everyone, and enjoy the rest of your conference.